Communications on these matters are so important, and I've tried my best to learn a little bit about communications. I'm reminded of an experience I had in Montreal, Canada, years ago. My wife and I headed up to Montreal. She was 7 months pregnant. Just a couple of kids that had never been out of Alabama. Pulled in that big city, into the filling station, and I got out of the car, and I said to the little attendant that had a white jacket and a mustache on, I says, "Mister, look under the hood, check the tires, and fill her up with gas." And that attendant stood back and looked at me, and he says, "Mister, you got to speak either French or English." Sometimes I think politically a lot of folks didn't know where I was speaking French or English. I'll improve that this next go around.
Fob was a very effective governor. I think that the unfortunate part of it is that that story was not told.
He was not busy setting up a public relations campaign. He was busy getting the job done.
Fob was probably the most straightforward man I've ever been associated with in politics. If it was good for the state, we went with it. If it wasn't good for the state, it was a bad deal.
Sitting in a meeting with Fob and we'd say, "Fob, we can't do this. This is just politically, this will kill you. This is not what we ought to be doing." And Fob looking at us and saying, "Fellas, we didn't come down here for this place to change us. We came to change it."
Some of the things we're seeing the results of now, he instigated some of the reforms and some of the progress in education and that sort of thing. He may not be getting the credit for it.
I'd carry him a problem that I knew he should be informed about. Most of the time I knew what his answer was going to be. It was going to be the old stock answer: do what's right. Do what's right for the people of Alabama.
Well, first of all, I don't think he's a politician at all. I think Fob James is a statesman.
I just didn't do any public relations from a political standpoint. Every time we accomplished something, I didn't call a press conference to announce it. I should have explained the reasons for what we are doing, such as the prisons or the highway tax, more than I did. But I thought the people of Alabama wanted a workhorse as governor, not a show horse.
No one really knows Fob's record, and he accomplished a lot of things that nobody really knows about.
They just never got the true story about Governor James. That's the long and short of it.
Everything that he did, if the story was really out, it would, I think, surpass any other administration that's ever been in the state of Alabama.
The Fob James story. A great Alabama story that will surprise you. It began in Lynette, Alabama, where Fob James was born in 1934. His parents were school teachers, and Fob James learned early about hard work. He delivered newspapers before school, sold peanuts at the ballpark, and pushed the lunch wagon through the textile mill. And he played a little football.
And it wasn't too many kids that could play football and still make all A's in school. You know, that was just uncommon.
At Auburn, Fob studied engineering, met his future wife Bobby, and made All-American.
The Tigers are 43 yards away from pay dirt. Bobby to Fob James, who sees daylight and like a bolt of lightning is in the Baylor secondary. The 175-pound junior halfback shows his heels to the Bears and twists and turns on a determined 43-yard touchdown run, 13-7.
After Army service, Fob James went to work as an engineer. And before long, he had an idea. Fob developed a new way to make barbells and exercise equipment. A new company was born in modest circumstances. He had been told his idea wouldn't work, but Fob James made it work. From 2 employees using apple crates for desks, Diversified Products has become a major corporation employing 2,500. But as the business grew, Fob James suddenly saw another challenge as young people came to the plant looking for jobs.
You could tell as soon as they started to fill out an application They couldn't write their name down, they couldn't write the address down, and they couldn't give the essential information on any normal application. It absolutely broke your heart. That's why I ran for governor.
Once again, the experts predicted Fob James couldn't do it. He was an outsider. He couldn't beat the politicians. But campaigning in a school bus to emphasize education, he won the Democratic nomination and then defeated Guy Hunt in the general election by the largest margin in Alabama history.
I, Fob James,
Do solemnly swear
that
I will support the Constitution of
Fob
the United
James's
States
new beginning, January 1979.
and the
The
Constitution
experts
of the
again
State of
predicted
Alabama.
failure, and no wonder.
So long as
Fob James became governor during the worst recession since the 30s, a time of high interest rates, high unemployment, record inflation. Tax revenues were down. Federal funds had been cut 30%, and Hurricane Frederick was only months away. When Governor James looked at state government, he saw a Medicaid program $34 million in the red, a highway department spending half its budget on interest, state prisons and mental health facilities facing federal takeover, and the Goat Hill gang of special interest politicians and lobbyists ready to fight this outsider to protect politics as usual. But a tough job was nothing new to Fob James.
He said, well, we won World War II in 4 years. Why can't we straighten down Alabama in 4 years?
I saw no need to hesitate. I was not worried about the political consequences and don't think I would ever be worried about the political consequences. So in one sense, I could say, yes, maybe I did try to do too much too soon, but again, if I had it to go over again, I don't know what I would leave out.
Not much was left out. Fob James applied his back-to-basics philosophy across the board. As he had promised, education came first, and his approach was simple.
One question we need to ask ourselves every day: is it in the best interest of the child? If it is, we do it. If it's not, we don't.
When people talk about Fob James and his educational program, it was a very positive program, and this state will reap the benefits for a long, long time.
Governor Fob James spent half of every working day on education, and the results show it. Against the opposition of the education politicians, he pushed through statewide testing to identify the schools doing the job and those that weren't. His special skills teams visited problem schools and got results. Test scores proved it. The James program included testing new teachers, expanding kindergartens, the largest teacher pay raises ever. And Fob James personally took over as head of the state school board, a post previous governors had neglected. The results were spectacular. For the first time ever, Alabama's school children met the national average on achievement tests.
Many would say I didn't know much, and that's right, politically, but I knew what I wanted to happen. I wanted youngsters to learn to read and write and in the process feel good about themselves. So within 30 days, we had moved aggressively to see that every child was tested so we knew where we stood.
He is the governor that started testing in schools so we could measure achievements.
We sent in special teams and we encountered and challenged the key to education and its management. And management's dodge in the governor's office.
He has already proved himself to me as far as he is a friend of education. He's a friend of the teachers.
That to me is what being governor is all about. Not grandiose schemes, not the politics of public relations daily, but a cutting edge.
The cutting edge. But while Fob James was working on education, the Goat Hill gang was working on him. The record became so distorted that even school teachers, who got record pay raises under Fob James, believed he was their enemy.
Teachers got a 32.5% increase when I was governor. Now, most of them don't know that. And I meet many teachers, and I can tell
when they don't know it, because they come toward me and they start swishing and pointing that finger about 20 feet before they get there, and they said, "Now, Bob, how can I vote for you and get a raise?" You know, that's hard for me to understand. That's part of the communications problem that I didn't realize, that French and English business.
Somehow, this state has to be turned around, and one of the ways to do it is to educate our young people, and he is the educational governor.
The differences between Fob James and the Goat Hill Gang were never more apparent than when Alabama unexpectedly received $450 million in oil lease funds. The politicians said, "Let's spend it." Fob James said, "No."
I thought that we needed to salt it away, to put it in the bank, to protect it from the politicians that wanted to take it and spend it all before the month was out for this program or that program, building government. And it was a fight to lock it up. We locked it up.
While other states were spending their oil money, Fob James held steady. He won, and so did Alabama. Vital improvements were completed at no cost to the taxpayer. And when the trust fund pays these off, the principal, now more than $700 million, will still be there, ready to go to work again for Alabama. The Anniston Star called Fob's plan a gift to the future.
Nothing wrong with our image throughout the world, wherever I have ever been. I've never found it a disadvantage being from the state of Alabama, period.
When it gets down to business, Fob James speaks the language. The experts told him Alabama couldn't compete against Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee. But in 4 major industrial recruitment showdowns, Fob James and Alabama won them all. Despite the recession, under Fob James, there was more new investment and new jobs created than ever before or ever since.
I don't like to pass taxes. I'm against taxes. We got enough taxes if you run the government like you ought to run it.
Running government right was a Fob James specialty. Despite revenue losses, despite being forced to declare proration, Fob James maintained services without major tax increases.
He was probably the only governor I've ever seen that actually sat down and did the entire state budget with pencils and paper and would just lock up for 2 weeks and do it.
He would actually sit there and have a budget on top of his desk. And when a department head would come in, he would say, "Well, you know, why do you have more employees than you had last week?" And it's pretty hands-on management.
Hands-on, head-on. Liquor agents abolished, private stores allowed. The first centralized environmental agency established. Required the legislature to put the budget first and everything else second. Cronyism out, merit hiring in. Women and blacks appointed to key posts. Fob ordered a freeze in state hiring, and his administration stopped growth in government. Rescuing Medicaid may be the best example of Fob's management skills. He transformed a $34 million deficit into a $7 million surplus. Even some Republicans were impressed.
I have great respect for your Governor Fob James. Come to Alabama and learn how a governor and state legislature took a Medicaid budget $34 million in the red and put it in the black while increasing services.
All in all, the James administration saved millions while protecting and improving services. As usual, the story didn't make the headlines.
It took a manager, and had it not been for Fob James, any other governor would have raised taxes tremendously. Look at the next 4 years.
He worked long hours. He's the kind of fellow that you'd walk in at 9, 10 o'clock at night, and he was still at his desk going over numbers. You know, to me, that's Fob James. That's what a lot of people missed about Fob James.
Federal takeover of Alabama's prisons. That's what Fob James faced. And once again, he came up with a precedent-setting solution.
It was a remarkable thought that Governor James had, because never before in the history of this country, and never since for that matter, has the governor of a state volunteered to become receiver of a major governmental enterprise.
The federal court said yes, and Fob James, governor of Alabama, took over as receiver of Alabama's prisons. He put inmates to work, disciplined those who wouldn't work, and built 3 new prisons, doubling the number of cells.
He's certainly a strong proponent of law and order, but unlike some people, he's not hysterical about it, he's just effective.
Fob James reinstated capital punishment in Alabama, toughened up the criminal laws, and set up the first narcotics unit. And when that unit executed the biggest drug bust in state history, Fob James was right there with them. His security detail thought that was carrying hands-on government too far, but morale in the narc unit soared.
One of the criticisms that I heard a number of times about Fob was that he was not able to work with the legislature. I don't think that's true at all. I think he worked well with the legislature.
Fob James and the legislature. The disagreements got the headlines, but there's a lot more to the story.
The legislature gave me 4 budgets in 4 years within 1% of what I sent up. That's a fact. So that's a matter of record. I found that if I went in on the tough questions, like budget isolation, they gave me that. They gave me trust fund. They gave me capital punishment. They gave me reform of our criminal code in mass. They gave me many tough pieces of legislation. But I thought the relationship was, yes, we would argue, yes, we would debate, but you know that I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. And we will make the hard decisions.
I think that if you talk to a legislator today that served with Fob James, they'd tell you he was the fairest governor that they've ever worked with, that he was there, that his door was open, that he was available, that he not only was he available, but he listened, and that he kept them informed.
Fob is a great salesman. He is probably the best one-on-one with legislators that I've ever seen. Once he really understood the need of talking to legislators about issues and getting commitments, he was as good as anybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to present to you tonight Governor of the State of Alabama, the Honorable Fob James.
Fob James came to Montgomery to make fundamental changes. Never has a governor tackled so many problems head-on. Controversy was natural. Still, Fob James persuaded the legislature to pass more than 70% of his program. If that's confrontation, we need more of it.
I believe in voluntary prayer in public school systems. I believe it is constitutionally correct.
Voluntary prayer in schools. While others talked, Fob James acted, challenging federal jurisdiction. He remains the only governor ever to win on this issue in federal court, and his argument even convinced the U.S. Justice Department. But after he left office, there was no follow-up. When you look back at Fob James's record, the bold proposals, standing up to Goat Hill, fighting for real change, it's startling to realize how simple and fundamental was the philosophy behind the record. Is it good for the child? Guard the taxpayers' money. Do what's right for Alabama. A different philosophy that made a difference. James was not the kind of politician or the kind of governor Alabama is used to. He didn't play politics like other politicians. The people didn't appreciate Fob James. He provided probably the most honest administration in recent times. Special interest groups found themselves on the outside, looking in. The time may come when our state will wish for his kind of leadership again.
Somebody asked me, said, Bobby, how do you feel about it? And I said, professional. And I mean that in the sense that we sort of know the arena now. We sort of know what's out there. And I think Fob will be extremely effective this time because he knows the job from top to bottom. He has spent the 7 years that we've been out of office continuing to learn, to study. I think we're just older and hopefully a little wiser. And I don't know, you get the feeling that you're just sort of ready, you know what I mean? Just, you're ready for the task.
Since leaving office in 1983, Fob James has been busy, setting up a marina and boat repair business, as well as a company to battle coastal erosion. In 1986, he ran for governor again.
I got our supporters into that race halfway in the fourth quarter. When we got in on the playing field, half the state had already committed, and I simply failed to get my message to the voters. That's why I got whipped. In retrospect, I should have gotten whipped. That is not the case this time. It is not the case this time.
I like his spirit. I like the way in which he goes about in doing a job. And I really believe within my heart that he is the man for governor.
He'll do what's best for this state, and he's got the guts to do it, to face the people in Montgomery.
They say, Fob, you got to learn to be a politician. I'm working on it.
He was told on many occasions that, you know, Fob, you got to be more political. And, you know, his response to is we got a job to do. You know, we did the politics during the campaign. Now we've got a job to do. We got to make some things happen for the taxpayers of the state of Alabama.
And I found education in Alabama, unfortunately, too much is riddled with nepotism and politics. And I tried my best to get it out of there, and I did get a lot out of that. I'll get a lot more next time.
I think that the drug problem is tied to education. And I think if the parents listen to Governor James and his education program and the way to resolve the drug problem, they'll agree with it.
And we were not an empire builder. We were an empire breaker. That drove a lot of the Goat Hill gang crowd up a wall. And we'll probably drive them up a wall this time even more than we did last time.
Fob cannot be swayed unless you have all the facts. When he makes a decision that he's going to go a direction, he's like a bulldog. It takes lightning to make him turn loose, or a water hose.
He's got high moral standards. He's ethical, and he's stubborn. And that's not bad.
Give me a man or woman from Lynette, Alabama, or Opelika, or Tallahassee, or Decatur, with his heart or her heart in the right place, wants to do something, you don't need political experience, in my opinion. That's what the politicians tell you, because so you'll keep sending them back, like they're going to balance the budget. They tell you got to have political experience, just so you'll keep sending them back. I'm different. I'm an outsider, but I do have 4 years of political experience, so you ought to send me back.
And we'd say this is what we ought to be doing. This is going to meet well with the public. These folks will respond to this. We can get the legislature to support this. And Fob James saying, is it right? Now, those are the kinds of stories that I can remember about Fob James that make a difference with me. He wanted to know, was it right? Was it good for the state? And that's important, that we have some people making those kinds of decisions for us in state government based on, is it right and is it good for the state?
I'm still an outsider. I'm not part of the political system, but I've been governor for 4 years, and I know what can be accomplished in that office. That's why I run for governor.
I think that Fob has some things he wants to finish.
I dream of a government committed to public service, totally unselfish in motive and action. Let the light of literacy shine for every child, and let us intensify the war on drugs, where our young people by the thousands say no to drugs, and where drug dealers are put behind bars for a long, long while. Let us recognize clean air and clean water are cornerstones of a good life, and take whatever action is necessary to clean up our waters from Mobile Bay to the streams and rivers of North Alabama. On the economic front, we can do better. We can have a state where our youngsters can make a living at home, and that we must do. The acid test of any society is how it provides for its young and for its old. On the subject of health care, we must make that a reality for every citizen of this state. A government must feel compassion
A government must be disciplined. There is no conflict between the two. It's time for a renaissance of common sense.
Fob James, businessman, governor, candidate for governor. When you look at the whole story, it's a remarkable record. It's time again for a bold, courageous governor who will stand up to Montgomery and speak up for Alabama, who will put the public interest ahead of public relations, who may not win them all, but who will fight them all. It's time for a new beginning, again.
That, to me, is what being governor is all about. Not grandiose schemes, not the politics of public relations daily, but a cutting edge